Hello, I'm Soycat, and the biggest fiscal event of the year just occurred, and if you've been following UK politics, you'll have seen months of media stories about how this was going to shape and massively change the country, but what exactly has changed? Well, I'll put on my glasses so you trust me as we talk about the numbers today, because this is the budget which is used by the government to shape your behaviour, and so what exactly is it they want to shape from you? Let's go into the 7 key categories as broken down by the BBC today. This is the biggest fiscal event in the UK, and it's Labour's second budget since coming to government. What exactly have they changed that's so drastic? Well, it's something that people have spoken about a lot in huge detail, but the truth is the biggest measure starts with personal taxation. There are only 2 simple things here, but they are really important to know, because if you are an individual that goes out to work, then you need to know that national insurance and income tax thresholds are frozen for an extra 3 years beyond 2028, which would be an entirely non-controversial thing if we lived in a world with no inflation and no wage growth. If £50,000 in 2017 bought you the same amount as £50,000 today, and the same salaries were expected everywhere, I think people would say that's fair enough that once you earn more than that, you should pay a 40% marginal rate of tax. However, because of the fact that inflation has gone up a lot during that period, this is being marked as a measure to drag more people into higher tax bands over time. The Financial Times is going further, calling this a stealth tax. This is something the media loves to say. I've got to say that the phrase stealth tax is used all of the time because it is a tax that has gone up massively that you might not realise, because people think £1 is £1, but £1 is actually worth about 80p as of 10 years ago, and dramatically less as you go further back in time. Basically, if you earn around £50,000 a year, then you will be amongst the hardest hit by this, because your income that was previously being taxed at 20% is now going to be taxed at 40%. Marginally speaking, you have to say marginal 5 times or you get comments from people who don't understand that you understand the difference between marginal and regular tax, as if that's not what we usually talk about. Now, the reason that Labour feel comfortable doing this is because people earning £50,000, the worst hit by this, are about the 70th percentile of full-time UK employee wage people, which means that only the top 30% will be hit by this, but lots of those people will start to expect to pay more and more of their salary towards taxes, which is a shame because all of their other expenses will have gone up. That obviously assumes that incomes rise just in line with inflation. A lot of people will get paid more than that and might feel entirely fine. But yeah, this also means that if you are earning any amount now that is above the tax-free threshold, you will pay more of that income in tax than you would have previously. And if you then earn that income, you can't put more of that money into your cash ISAs, the individual saver accounts. It is the way it exists in the UK. We have one of the most generous allowances for this anywhere in the world. You can put £20,000 of your money into a specific account. It has to be called an ISA every single year, and it is tax-free, all of the interest or the investment gains. However, if you want to use a cash ISA, it's capped at £12,000 a year now, with the rest being reserved for investments only. If you want to invest, then you get £20,000 of allowance a year. If you want to use cash, it's £12,000. And let's be honest, you probably shouldn't be putting more than £12,000 of cash away in a year. However, if you do, should you expect to pay tax on it? In my opinion, no. In the opinion of the government, yes. If you're under 65, by the way, apparently. Oh, can you stop putting money into cash ISAs when you're 65? That's an interesting caveat I didn't know about. Anyway, wage, benefits, and pensions are one that will affect a lot more people if you are reliant on the government, or indeed in some way, like whether that's benefits or pensions, or indeed if you are reliant on the national minimum wage. Here is the category that is most important for you. First of all, if you receive universal or child tax credit, that is not child benefit. Child benefit gets paid no matter how many children you have. But if you are on universal or child tax credit, then the amount you receive for having a third or subsequent child will be the increase that you would get for having a third child will be scrapped. So in other words, now instead of saying 2 children as the max the government will give you money for, that is being scrapped. This is a hugely controversial one because some would say, wait, so you're now going to be encouraged to have more children because you'll get paid more, and others would say, yeah, previously people with more than 3 children wouldn't get the adequate support that we deemed adequate as a country. So this is a big Labour policy they've managed to implement. Another big Labour policy is a minimum wage increase to rise 4.1% from £12.21 to £12.71. That means in the UK, if you are in employment and you're over 21, the minimum anyone can pay you is £12.71. It has to be free because volunteering is fine, or £12.71. Anywhere in between those amounts is illegal. This is a really interesting interesting policy because the minimum wage was introduced in 1999. Amazingly, we didn't have it before that. Again, I find that interesting. Maybe you do too. And what's interesting is it was £3.60 back then, and inflation hasn't gone up 300% in the preceding years. So if you look at real terms, national minimum wage, it's actually gone up drastically above inflation and drastically above base wages, which does have the interesting knock-on effect of feeling like if you are just above minimum wage, or even if you are decently above minimum wage on a graduate salary of 30 or 35,000, now the minimum wage is 25,000, and so there's a really interesting squeeze happening at the bottom there. So yeah, there is a squeeze at the top 30%, but also interestingly a squeeze near the bottom 30%. If you're at the bottom of society, things are, you could argue at least in terms of budgetary reasons, things are going quite well. If you're at the top, maybe they're going fine, but they have actually planned to address that. We'll come to it later. But it's interesting that there is this like squeeze at the bottom and the squeeze at the top there. Some would argue it's something minimum middle class getting rid of. I would argue that it's just the way that governments are trying to maximize their tax revenue. Because if you have to pay your employee £12.71 an hour and the national insurance and income tax thresholds are frozen, now when you pay someone minimum wage, they have to pay a decent amount towards the government in tax, and that amount goes up every year as the minimum wage increases and as the as the tax-free threshold doesn't increase with it. It's an interesting policy, but it's working well, it seems, for raising more money. The rate for 18 to 20-year-olds has gone up by even more, 8.5%. The plan is eventually to have a single rate for all adults. The minimum wage was introduced in 1999, but it actually split into two in, I think it was like somewhere in the 2010s where they tried to make it so only 25-year-olds got more money, but then we split that back down to being just 21-year-olds again. It's very confusing is what I'm saying, but there's an argument that having a different minimum wage for 25-year-olds makes a lot of sense, but it's an argument that we as a country decided against. Okay, so with that said, the basic and new state pension will go up by 4.8%, which is more than the rate of inflation. We are having a huge crisis, and we have decided that raising pensions by more than inflation is a priority. Is that a good priority? That is the country's decision that we are clearly saying is not, or at least that is what has been decided. Taxes are going up so that working people will receive slightly less because they have to pay more, and pensioners will receive slightly more in general too. Very high earning pensioners will therefore actually lose under this because they'll get more from the government, but they'll lose more in tax. So there is an argument to that, but right now our biggest expense is going up by 4.8%. Then we've got Help to Save scheme, which offers people on universal credit a bonus on savings, extended and expanded beyond 2027. It's a decent scheme. It's a confusing one, but that's good. If you are on universal credit, you can get guaranteed money from the government if you save. You probably should do it, is my recommendation. Okay, so housing and property is the most interesting one. There were months of speculation about moving from council tax, which is based on your 1991 property value, even if your house didn't exist in 1991, which I think is hilarious. But there was some idea about changing that. Instead, the idea is if your property is worth more than £2 million, that's 2,000, then you will now face a council tax surcharge of between 2,500 and 7,500. This is called a mansion tax, and it's kind of buried in here. It's not I haven't seen it spoken about very often. This is a huge increase because your current cap on council tax is somewhere in the £3,000. So some people are going to be tripling their council tax they owe, and you have to owe that if you live in the house, and also that gets tripled if you don't live in the house. Lots of interesting things going on there in most councils. Some councils don't care about that, but most councils do. So there is a huge increase in property taxes if you have a house worth more than 2 million. The overwhelming majority of these are in London. A lot of people would say like, oh yeah, it's just a £2 million house. I would say as someone who, who has certainly, I would defend even the concept of like the £1 million house. I would say £2 million is solidly, yeah, you're comfortable enough, you could argue, but also it means that your taxes are going up on your income, and then your post-income tax will go up as well, which is maybe not popular with everyone, but that is something that the tens of, it's not very many, but a few properties will face a massive increase in their taxing there. Whereas if you drive, your fuel duty will go down followed by a staged increase starting next year. But this increase never actually comes. Every year they say next year we'll raise fuel duty, and then they usually don't. Fuel prices are massively below inflation. I got a petrol car this year, and it's amazing how little it costs to run because engines are more fuel efficient, and petrol has gone down below the price, or it's gone up below the price of inflation, meaning it's gone down. So really good things if you drive a petrol car. If you drive an electric or a plug-in hybrid, you'll have to pay per mile you drive. This is really interesting to me to include plug-in hybrids, but I guess they could be used as an electric car. So if you drive, then you have to pay because the amount of fuel duty is going down every year as more people electrify. This is really, really interesting to me because the benefits of that should be going to regulated rail fares for journeys in England being frozen for the first time since 1996. So if you are in the UK, as a result of Great British Rails, the government would say, you will now have a flat freeze on your journey. There is no price increase that is associated with that. The price that you paid last year is the price you'll pay this year. And honestly, I kind of like this. When I used to have to commute into, or not commute, when I used to have to come into London to do silly things, it'd be annoying that, like January would come along and like, oh, that was £13 before, and now it's £13.80. So that's really nice. But also, that is a big cost to the government that actually people won't even notice. I think that people who complain about train prices don't think that train prices are about 3% too expensive. They think it's like 80% too expensive. And so this is a big cost that I don't know that it's going to work necessarily. I think we need rail fare reform, not rail fare ceilings. But maybe if we kept it, if we keep a ceiling on there for a while, maybe that'll solve some problems. This is something I'm very curious about. This is something I am also curious about. Again, I am someone who has a petrol car, and I think that it's kind of crazy to charge electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids more while also saying that I get a little cut on my tax rate. I'll take it, I guess, but I don't know that that is good policy. Whereas this is, I think, potentially good policy, but it's all about the incentives, right? So the idea behind increasing the tax on sugary drinks and extending it to pre-packaged milkshakes and lattes is that loads of people are drinking milkshakes and thinking, oh, it's healthy, it's all the calcium. But it's not healthy to be drinking a drink that has 400 calories for a bottle this big. So basically, this is an incentive from the government where they want the manufacturers of these to stop making them so sugary, or they want you to pay extra if you're going to drink them, discouraging you from doing so. This is, in theory, a way to get more tax money, but they'll make way more money from the £2,500 a year charge on the £2 million, or they'll make way more money from bringing in fiscal drag, or what you might call a stealth tax. The amount that this will raise for the government is absolutely crazy when you think about it. Like, if you earn, I think the top 10% is somewhere like £70,000 a year. If you earn £70,000 a year, the calculator's not broken because of the website archiving. But you're paying hundreds more every single year, and it will keep stacking for every year to do this. So they're talking about thousands of pounds per person. A lot of people will say that therefore this is a income raising rule. This is there because they're trying to stop you drinking so many packaged milkshakes and lattes. If you get diabetes, it's bad because we have nationalized healthcare. Although, I would argue maybe there's an argument that if people die sooner, that's better. But the government is saying it's even if we have to have people live longer and therefore cost the government more, it's better that they're not dying from obesity. And I can kind of get down with that, even if I think it's a weird. I guess I think the idea of taxing sugary drinks is weird, and I hate the way that manufacturers have responded. Rather than just paying a tax now, any sugary drink out there, like let me just type in like. A fizzy drink, I want a fizzy drink, right? I want like 7-Up, or I want a Schlur. If you want any fancy drink now, if it's not zero sugar and it's a sugar version, it has like a weird amount of sugar. It's always half sugar, half sweetener, which is in theory a great thing, right? Does it have the calorie information on here? Okay, so it's got artificial sweeteners is what it says there. Where's the nutrition? So you can see that the amount of sugar in there is about half what it should be, because the rest is always going to be, okay, what do we got here? Plant concentrate sweeteners. And so I'm a big believer in sweeteners, but I want either sweeteners with the tiniest bit of sugar, or I want sugar, or I want just sweetener, if I'm being honest. I love diet drinks. I hate that we live in a world where there is no such thing as a full sugar drink, because either manufacturers don't think that consumers won't pay it, or, consumers genuinely won't pay 17p extra. The only full sugar drink you can get in the UK is Coke regular, and it won't even show up here. Let me just, okay, Coke Let's find some regular old Coke. Regular Coke comes with the massive surcharge, so it's the only drink that has the normal amount of sugar in it, which is, by the way, just too much to be drinking regularly. I want to be clear. 10.6 grams of sugar, 39% of your daily allowance per can. You should not be buying 24 of these, maybe you could argue. But the point that the fact is that the sugar tax hasn't disincentivized people from buying these. It's disincentivized them from being made, which I would argue is a bit of like a loss as far as that goes. Anyway, so the other important things that happened is that the budget, the UK will grow by 1.5% this year, upgraded from 1%. So there's 50% more growth in the economy this year, is what you would say. Were you excited for the Labour government? If you were not excited, you would say we have 1.5% growth this year, which is a tragedy. I mean, if we look at the amount that, like, basically in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, 4% GDP growth a year was the expected, whether you were low, middle income, or high income. This was just how things went. 4% a year was a good year, 2% a year was a bad year. In the 2000s, when I was first, getting into, economics and the way the world worked, like 2% was a good year. You wanted a little more than 2%, but you should go for 2% as your baseline. Now, at 2013 is where we started getting down to 1%. Now, if the economy grows by 1% in a year, we're like, woo, 1%! 1% bigger than last year! Whereas developing economies are still growing by an average of 4%, according to this graph. But some developing countries, the South Korea, not developing anymore, I guess, but the Chinas, the South Koreas, the Thailands, the Mexicos of the world can still deliver 5 to 8% growth years. They are growing their economies faster than we are, which is great if you think the whole world should be equal economically speaking, but we should be looking at where we are right now and saying, over the last 20 years, we have lost nearly a doubling of our economy. We should all be double as wealthy as we were in the 90s, but instead, we're languishing around the same and we're paying far more tax. But that's a different point for a different time. The final thing is that English mayors will be able to tax overnight hotel stays, and the cost of a prescription in England will be frozen at £9.90 for another year. No government wants to raise the prescription charge to over £10, and so it sticks at £9.90. Hopefully it stays at £9.90 long enough that eventually inflation gets rid of it, and like Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, we can have them for free, because I think that the prescription charge has such a dumb impact on how healthcare works. Like, why is it free besides the prescriptions? And why is it free with the prescriptions for every other part of the UK besides where the people live? Damn it, I've got complaints about that. But the final point here is to say, so what does the government really want? And what does this actually mean for the markets? Well, okay, so first of all, what's the response? Well, the opposition, who is technically the Conservative Party, says that, yeah, actually, they said last year the tax rises were a one-off, but actually there is a lot of tax rising going on this year, £40 billion according to the Conservatives. The markets have responded by, also, inflation will be 0.4%. So 0.4% inflation is really, really low. And yet we are still paying, what's the increase? 4.8% for pensioners, 8.5% for 18 to 20-year-olds, and 4.1% for 21-year-old plus if they're on the minimum wage. So there is I guess, an equalizing effect of that, and also a making pensioners wealthier effect of that, which is interesting. And then, the rest of the most interesting other thing about this is that the markets have reacted in not the way you might necessarily expect. So if we go, oh, wow, this is it's a developing story. Lots has happened since I started recording this video. The markets have reacted with, so you can look at government borrowing costs, and you can see that, like, oh yeah, all the early signs for the budget were good, and as soon as the budget came out, it was looking kind of good, and then, oh god, what is this? I don't think that this tiny reaction is that important, though, and I think just making sure that even a crazy reaction is still 0.1% gilt rises in the UK isn't that bad. We have a lot of long-term problems with our borrowing costs in the UK that we are not addressing, but I guess you could argue that the way we're addressing it is we're deliberately raising more and more money each year. £40 billion of tax rises is there because we're trying to balance things, so we need to rely less on borrowing money so we can spend less money on interest payments or whatever. Is that a good thing? We'll go into that another point. But now let's go into the final takeaway. What is the government trying to achieve with this budget? Seemingly, outside of raising a bit more money than before, I think the big things that you can say are happening this year is the government is trying to discourage people from driving. They're doing that in like quite a long-term way. 2026 if you drive a petrol, 2028 if you drive an electric car. They're trying to encourage people to get on the train. that is a good thing for the environment, but also for now the railways being state-owned or state-run or whatever. They're trying to discourage sugary drinks in all their forms. For what I think it was insane to exclude milkshakes and lattes to begin with. So if you like your coffee black, you'll be totally fine. But if you don't like it, because I'll be honest, the Starbucks Frappuccinos are pretty close to a milkshake. I like them quite a bit, I'll be honest with you. But if you are a fan of those, you'll be paying more. And more realistically, they will stop existing in their current form, with sweeteners replacing some of the sugar. This will be a healthier decision for you. But, you know, whether you like healthier decisions being made in your behalf is a thing we came up at in a different video. I think the effect would be good. But I think the overall effect is good, but also it's like contentious while it takes effect. I think but I also think that the benefit, I think the Labour government have achieved broadly what they're looking to do in like a way the markets can accept, which is if you are in the bottom 30% of society, things are pretty good. If you're in the bottom 30% or you're a pensioner, things are going pretty well for you. If you're in the top 30%, things are going to go a little bit worse. If you're anyone in the UK over £2 million property, let's be honest, by asset wealth, that's top 10%. If you're in the top 10% by asset wealth, things will be getting a little bit worse too. And if you are driving an electric car, as of 2028, things will get worse. But if this goes like how fuel duty goes, maybe it's just one of those like, yeah, if it needs to happen, it's now in the plans. But basically, everything is very much ticking along. The Labour government are trying to prove that while they can progress their ambitions, and for people with more than 2 children on benefits, for people on minimum wage, this is very good, and they have progressed those ambitions of making sure those people earn more. They are progressing their ambitions without upsetting the markets. And is this as good as they could do? Well, I guess that's up to you and how good you think that is. But I would say, overall, if you live in the UK and you didn't watch this video, you wouldn't be any worse off. And I think that's probably a good way to... I think that, genuinely, that's a good thing for a budget to have at the end. For it to be like, oh yeah, I now definitely don't ever want to own a property worth more than £2 million. Hopefully, living in London means my property... You know, I now have to... I guess it's a good hope, like, oh, or it'd be a good thing to happen, like, oh no, I hope my property doesn't quadruple in price, or I'll have to pay an extra surcharge when I live in it. That is something that I think is definitely going to be a real sting in the future. Everything that we think about will only affect super rich people. Eventually, because we freeze, thresholds, eventually comes and affects everyone else. Income tax used to be only on the top 2% of people, and now it's literally if you're on the minimum amount you can pay, you are paying thousands of income tax a year. There's lots of things like this that I think are gradual changes, but I do think that overall it's a fine budget. And is that a good thing? I guess it depends how radical you like your change. The current polling suggests that many people would like their change a little bit more radical. But yeah, with that said, I've got one more video I think I'd like to make before we leave politics season behind. I think, I say that, but we always come back. But I think I'd like to talk, because I got a comment that was said something like, oh, Toycat, this is, you're trying hard to hide your vaguely center-right political ideology. I think I'd like to make a video on my most center-right political opinions, because I don't know that I have that many of them, but I definitely think that I have some that I strongly believe in. So it might be fun to make, right? Or maybe it wouldn't be fun, but I'll make it anyway, because it'll be fun for me. Also, one last little update. This video had some spicy response. Look at this. Immediately upon watching it, a bunch of people unsubscribed, and then a bunch of people subscribed after watching it after. Which means there's like a great replacement happening of our subscriber base, right? Traditional subscribers are being replaced by new subscribers who are more interested in these videos. Eventually, we won't have any geography viewers. Everyone will be a political viewer. It's terrifying to think about. Also, everyone will be male. Although that's already true. Also, a lot of US viewers, huh? Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching. I don't know how to end videos, so you just gotta leave at some point. I know that's what you do with all your other videos, so just leave when you get bored of this one. But if you didn't, then second channel, don't care. Goodbye.